Hey guys, today we're going to look at the 4 things to focus on to instantly improve your prompts. There's no prompting frameworks, no built-in APIs, anything like that. 4 key ideas that you can focus on as you iterate and build your prompts that will improve it right out of the gate. No matter the use case, all of these ideas and concepts are critical when you talk about sort of building a prompt. And if you can focus on them during the development, you will drastically improve the prompts that you build. So let's take a look. So these are the 4 ideas or sort of breakdowns of a prompt or a prompting process that you need to understand and focus on to be able to improve your prompts pretty much instantly. And I'll kind of walk through each of them and then we'll go through a bunch of examples, sort of showing what each of these looks like when you're actually working on your prompt. The first one is the instruction. So, how are we instructing the model to complete our task? And specifically, when we think about sort of improving and writing better prompts, how do they map to our goal state output? Of course, our goal state output is we have this idea of what the end result of our prompt task should be. When we say summarize this document, when we say generate this blog, when we say, write this document or whatever we're doing, we have an idea in our mind of what that means to be successful. And the model, based on the data we provide it, has some other idea of what that is. So the best way that we can map our idea to the model to make that as clear as possible, that's sort of our goal state output definition. What does that actual sort of success result look like for our use case? Specifically, when we talk about improving our prompt, this is going to be using context, using data to be able to do that. We'll talk about what that looks like a little bit further. The third key idea to think about is the model's understanding of the context that's provided and how to use the information to complete the task. So when we provide it, we'll see few shot examples when we see, data specific to the task, things like that. How does the model understand what we're doing? And then specifically for you, how can you ensure that the model understands how to use that data? And the last one is evaluation. How can we quantify our prompt and the results we have to be able to improve it? You're never going to be able to improve your prompt unless you are able to evaluate how the current state performs and be able to understand what that means in terms of improvements. Does that mean better instructions? Does that mean a new definition in the prompt of the goal state? Like, what does that sort of look like? These are the 4 key ideas to think about when prompting to improve your prompting overnight. So I do want to dive into context a bit further because this is going to be pretty important compared to the other ones. The other one's a little bit easier. This is going to be one that is a little bit more iteration focused in a lot of your prompts. Context is just the relevant information that you provide to a prompt or a model to understand how to complete your task. So this is things like, few shot examples of completing the task. This is the data that's used. If you're saying, hey, summarize this document, it's the document. How are you going to summarize it without providing that document? This is some of the things like, you'll see people write rules and stuff like that, specific rules to follow. All of this is context to sort of guide the model towards exactly what we need. And we'll sort of see how that works, how that sort of sways the model as we go through the use case. But all of those fall into this idea of context, and it can be thought of in the same way as human memory. If you are asked to do a task, let's say you're an email marketer and you are asked to write an email for somebody, you're going to write it in the way that you think is best based on your own knowledge, based on what you already understand about the task. But if I asked you to do that and then I gave you a guidebook sort of as you do the task, as you write that email, if I gave you a guidebook that sort of told you how to best do it, you would follow that. Why would you not follow that? You would sort of use the techniques, use the tricks outlined, and you would probably write one that looks a little bit better, or at least follows that format from that book a little bit better. It's the same idea. You are providing this context so the model has a better understanding of your task. And understanding how to do this effectively with a prompt is going to improve your workflow overnight. So I did want to sort of make that comparison between what that means in like a real world use case compared to how a model does it, and that it's the same idea. Another way to sort of look at context is that you will have sort of different context windows with your prompt. So that's the other sort of thing to keep in mind, that depending on the model you're using, you are going to have sort of different sized context windows that act differently and sort of perform on tasks differently, depending on how large your context window is. You might be able to fit only a page. You might be able to fit an entire book. You might be able to fit one rule, 10 rules, 1,000. Keeping that in mind is one thing that you'll want to consider. This isn't as relevant anymore as it used to be a year and a half ago or so when the prompt context windows were smaller, but that is good to reference that this is something that you are going to need to understand as you go through this task. Here's another sort of look at context in the way that the different people that use it or interact with your model see it differently. So you can see that, when we talk about context with users, who is the user and what are they looking for, right? So keeping that in mind when you put together the context that's used. If users are looking to use this to follow a specific format or a specific schema or something like that, keeping that in mind when you choose the rules or the data that's used. The content, that's another example of context there where, what type of information is interacted with. And then context, sort of keeping that in mind where we have sort of the prompt, the context window, and the large language model. So this is the prompt that we are going to look at first. This is one of my favorite examples when we talk about improving prompts. So let me walk through the case study a little bit. Your goal is to write an email subject line for a marketing email for an e-commerce company. And you are trying to sell in this email a specific blue dress. Let's say your e-commerce store offers a specific blue dress. And you are asked to build a model or a prompt to be able to generate these email subject lines, maybe a couple, maybe just one. And, let's say this is your first prompt, which is, I would say about as basic as it gets. Write an email subject line for marketing email for my women's clothing brand selling a blue dress. And you can see it comes back and it's fairly generic. And maybe you like this subject line, maybe you don't, maybe your company does, maybe they don't. But, when you sort of look at this, you have to sort of understand that what else are you really going to get from this model? Let's say you don't like it. What else are you going to get? You didn't provide it, any information other than this about the product, about your company, about your store, like, what other emails work well. Like, you didn't provide any data. And so the model just relies on its underlying training of how to generate, as best it can, a subject line. You didn't provide any personalization or guidance towards what you assume is a successful outcome. So if you looked at this and said, no, this isn't good enough, or your customer did that or something, well, there's a reason why. There's no other knowledge to go off to understand what is a good subject line. So we're going to go way further into this, but this is going to be the example that we use definitely out of the gate here because it's a good one to sort of follow on this workflow. Here's our prompt. We just saw it. We see the output we get. Like I said, probably very generic in terms of what we get. But I first want to start with some of the instructions piece. I want to sort of start with how can we best improve the understanding of the task. And quite frankly, there isn't a ton you can do on just the instruction side, quite honestly, because it's a fairly straightforward task. We mentioned writing an email subject line for a marketing email for a women's clothing brand. That's on that front as much as we could do without diving into the context. But the one thing I will add that I'm going to sort of include as an instructions piece is the actual product. Why would you not want to include the actual product data in your prompt? This is the first one, that the model doesn't know anything about the blue dress you're selling unless you tell it about it. How is this model going to know how to focus on the personalization, focus on the unique details of this product without including that? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add product data for a blue dress. So I pulled one up here on my other screen. I'm just going to plug this in. I don't know this brand. I don't know this product other than that it's a blue dress. So here's the product title, product description. Let me grab this description. Grab this. See if there's anything else I want here. No, I think that's fine. I think that's enough. We'll start with that. So now we've sort of said, like, okay, write an email subject line for marketing email, blah, blah, selling a blue dress. And we've provided the blue dress. You could even change this to selling the above blue dress. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it from blue dress to something less generic, the above, and I'm going to name the product. And let's see what we get. I'm going to go low temperature out of the gate. I've mentioned before, I like to see at the baseline, most sort of structured and standard level, what the outputs look like, and then we can adjust the temperature from there. This is a use case where higher temperature, more variability does make sense, so that we are definitely going to use a couple different temperatures, but I want to get a feel for the model's creative baseline. That's a better way of saying it. Sort of the baseline level of creativity when we're not adding random tokens to the equation. So let's see what we get. Step into summer elegance with our airy blue eyelet vanilla top. So okay, so now we're sort of mentioning the product, and this is more specific. This is more personalized than what we saw before. I think it's fine. We haven't provided any information about how to best write the subject line from a marketing perspective. We've just sort of said, hey, here's some product data. Let's sort of see what we can do based on that. And this is probably about as simple as you could get. You really do need to provide the product information to be able to do this. If you're not providing the product information, I really don't know what you're planning to do, because the model has no clue what you're trying to do at that point. Cool. So that is good. Let's run it a little bit higher temperature, see what sort of variability we can get. I'll go, 0.57 is fine. Let's see what we get. It's about the same. So the model has a pretty decent creative workflow or ability out of the box, which is kind of interesting to see. It did add a couple different terms, new. Let's see if we ramp this up a little bit more if we get even more variability. But that is kind of interesting to see there. Yeah, okay, so there we go. Now we see some stuff. We see the use of emojis. That's definitely a more diverse or rare token when you think about sort of the possible tokens at each step. Emojis would be one that are a little bit rare because they're not as commonly used as normal characters. So that's kind of cool. That looks kind of nice. The one thing that we could improve in the instructions, we haven't provided any info around the sort of variability of a subject line. We've just said write an email subject line. We haven't said what type of subject line or what to focus on or anything like that. I'm going to try write an eye-catching, and we should see some difference. I'm going to take our temperature back down because anytime we test changes, we want to isolate the variables and be able to see what we get at a base level. So I'm going to take this down, although this one fairly good. So let's kind of see what we get here with that change. Okay, and interesting. This time we do get emojis again, probably because we've added the eye-catching. It's visual. It's focused on being visual. And we can see sort of that's kind of the goal of the emoji. So that's kind of nice. And I bet you if we ramped up this temperature, this thing gets even more interesting that we kind of have there. So let's see what we get. Grenades are stunning. Okay, so kind of the same. We haven't provided any info about what it means to be a good email subject line, so we are kind of limited in what we can get there. And that's kind of the second part that I want to focus on, which is the goal state output definition. So we need to define for us what it means to have a successful email subject line. The model doesn't know. It doesn't know our company, doesn't know our marketing values or what we focus on or anything like that. So we need to provide some of that info so that it best understands what to follow. And the easiest way to do that is through few shot examples. It's to sort of give the model a couple examples of what we already think are good subject lines. If you already have this data set, then you just want to pull from those. In some instances, if you don't have that data set, maybe you have to generate your own or something like that. That's just kind of how it is, but you don't need a lot. Maybe 2 or 3 is perfectly fine. So that's kind of the next one here. So I'm going to grab a couple here from some YouTube searches and see if I see any that I like. And I will put these in here and I will come right back. So Googled around, found some pretty good fashion-related email subject lines for us to use. As I mentioned, if you were doing this in a real example where you are in charge of the marketing emails, you would probably already have these and you would know how well they perform, and you could choose the best performing ones and go from there. I just Googled and found these on HubSpot's list of the best email subject lines that they've seen. I thought they were both pretty good. They have emojis. They have kind of like quirky sayings. They have pricing and things like that. All the stuff you kind of want to see here. So let's see kind of how our generated example changes now that we've provided these. Now we've given the model a little bit of guidance for what direction to go in. So we should see some variation now and something that looks a little bit different, because we've essentially said, hey, when I care about a good email subject line, this is what it looks like. This is what a good one is. So we should see that look a little bit different. Yeah, so we see there use of the emojis, very nice. Kind of what we saw there before with, step into blah, blah, blah with our thing. Let's try to turn this up a little bit, see what we get with a little bit of variation. Yeah, and then we can see there. So we get something a little bit different there. Again, float through summer and our blah, 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 blah. So that looks pretty nice. Adds a little bit of variation, different from sort of what we saw before. So I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to add a couple more, and I want to see if we can add even more change, more variability, and see if we can get something that reads a little bit different. So added a couple more. Grabbed some more in the list, edited them a bit so that our products kind of read with the subject line like it should. Do want to run this through here and see what it looks like. Once again, we'll try with a 0 temperature, and let's see what we get. Okay, similar to what we've seen before with the emoji, step into summer elegance with our top blah, blah, blah. So let's take a look now with a little bit of a higher temperature, see what we get, see if the video is there. Let's run it. So we get a similar one here again, which is interesting. Higher temperature. I'm surprised that we're seeing that. Let's run it again. We should get something a little bit different this time. Okay, so that one's a little bit different. New emoji, float into summer elegance, blah, blah, blah. We should get a lot of variability with the temperature up like this. I moved it up a little bit more, see if we can get some more. We should get a decent amount. 0.92 is a pretty high temperature, so we should see some stuff that differs. I'm surprised that it is as sort of deterministic in the result that we're getting here with a pretty high temperature. I'm surprised we're seeing that. Okay, so there's a little bit different. So it does really like this emoji. One of the things that's interesting is this is a this is a product that is fairly similar to these. So I'm surprised it doesn't follow it a bit more. We are seeing some variability. The fact that we keep generating this token first probably leads to some of that diminished variability. But we are seeing some of that here as we process that through. There's another one you can see. So it's changing this sort of first sentence pretty well with this higher temperature. And we are getting those same emojis, which is kind of, kind of interesting. I wonder if we put, if we went like this and we started with an emoji. What am I trying to do here? This. And now let's generate this, see how that goes. Okay, so it's kind of the same that we saw. I was trying to see if I could just have it use that emoji as the first character instead of just generating it from there. But, we're seeing some variability here. We haven't provided, a ton of info outside of just what the product is and what, a couple successful subject lines looks like. So as we sort of add to that, we should see that change a little bit. So let me pull through this. Let me grab the next part, which is if we had sort of best marketing practices, best case, things to do, or specific rules that our marketing department follows or something like that, we would want to include that in here as sort of a guide of, hey, this is what words to use, this is what we don't use, this is our brand strategy, stuff like that. All of that can be provided in the subject or in the system prompt. And that sort of helps the model understand even more what it means exactly to be successful for our specific use case. So I'm going to go grab that. I have a list I want to use because it's from a reputable source. We're going to plug that in. We're going to run from there. Hey guys, so a couple things I did. First, I grabbed what we're going to use as our sort of set of rules. I found on HubSpot, one of the most reputable email marketing companies that's out there, their top tips to writing email subject lines. You can see urgency, curiosity, offers, personalization. They have a whole bunch of stuff here. I just grabbed that list and threw it in because I thought that was a pretty good list. Of course, if you were doing this for a company, you would have your own specific list that you want to use. But I'm just going to use this one because I think it's a really good list from a great company. The other thing I did that I want to try is I changed the model. Before we were using just the GPT-4 Turbo. I want to try GPT-4o and see if our results are a little bit different, because I really felt that the variability we were getting before, even though we weren't providing a ton of info, was less than I had expected. So I want to run this one through and see how this looks and be able to iterate from here. If 4.0 isn't any better or something like that, or if I don't really like the results, we'll go back. But GPT-4o should be better. It's the flagship model that they currently offer. So I probably should have been running on this one, before we had that. So we've added this new info. Let's run this through and see what we get. 0 temperature, as we saw before. And we can see now we get something that is a little bit different. Flower emoji, new arrival alert. One of the things that they talked about was some personalization, urgency and curiosity, new arrival, right? So that definitely fits there. And then, of course, naming the product. And that's with a 0 temperature. So I don't think that's that bad. So let's kind of turn this up and see if we get some stuff that's a little bit different. So this time we turn the temperature up. And this is one of the things that you will see when you turn temperature up on these models is that, I didn't specify that I only wanted one. I did say write an eye-catching email, but I didn't say only write one. And it gave us a bunch. So let's take a look. That's either a good thing or a bad thing in terms of what you thought. But if you don't specify only give me one, when you turn that temperature way up and you give it more randomness, sometimes that randomness needs to a whole list. So let's take a look here. We do have a bunch of things to look at. Elevate your summer wardrobe with it. We see emojis. Just in. Meet your new favorite summer blouse. That's the first time we've seen it not even name the product. It just sort of, is trying to catch their eye with saying what they have. Get summer ready with our thing. We got emoji. This one's very different. Fresh, feminine, flawless. Look at that. Discover our new top. You can see that, this time we do get stuff that is very different. We get, I think a little bit more variability. Every time we used to name the product. Now we have times where we don't. You know, the emojis was at 0 temperature, pretty much always used right out of the gate. We can see they don't even use it this one, they don't use it the first one. So now we see some more variability. We see some stuff a little bit different. This is what I expected before. Maybe not to this extent, you know, because some of these are really good. I think this one is, from a marketing perspective, really, really good. You know, the ability to, you know, look at something like this and understand instant elegance, right? We're talking about a nice product. We're talking about something that is, you know, sort of considered in their department elegant or something like that. We see that understanding. So this is pretty interesting. I really like these. So, and you can see we have provided these rules around kind of, for our use case, what does it mean to be successful? You know, we outline this, and there's probably, you know, plenty of other ways that that list could be used in other domains. But we can see, I mean, look, GPT even itself says they leverage urgency, curiosity, and a promise of summer stylish wardrobe to entice your audience to open the email. GPT clearly understands how to use these pieces, which is nice. We didn't, you know, give it a ton of info about what to use in that list. We just gave it the list, and it sort of understood it from there and moved from there. So that looks really good. I kind of like that. So, you know, now the question is, and this is something that you're going to reach, you know, every time you kind of do this, you know, how well does the model understand the context that's being provided when we talk about the outputs that are generated? And when it gives you something like this, that is a little bit easier, right? Like it's you know, it's saying these subject lines leverage, you know, the things that we put. So we can see there's some understanding there. Sometimes this can be misleading because GPT might just hallucinate and generate that, or it might not cover your whole list or something. Or maybe it says, you know, it leverages those things, but when you read them, it doesn't actually. So that can be misleading sometimes. But the question really is now, how do we know that it understands how to use the data we've provided? And the best way to do that is through evaluation. Our fourth sort of key idea there is the understanding that we need to evaluate these and iterate based on that evaluation. So I'm going to show you guys how we do our evaluation during development to be able to really hone in and dig on, we have these outputs, we have an idea of a goal state that we need to reach. Did we meet that? And then how do we iterate? So I'm going to pull up some stuff. I'm going to show you guys how we look at it, and we'll be able to go from there. One quick thing before we go over and look at the evaluation stuff, I wanted to play around with the instructions a little bit more to show how some of the changes to the instructions adjust the model's understanding of our goal state output, like what actually matters. So let's say we wanted this, so write email subject line, brand, blah, blah, blah. But let's say we wanted the subject line to focus not just on the product, but specific stuff around the product. I want to live prompt this, so we're going to kind of see how this goes. But I'm going to say, let's say we want to focus on, let's say we want to focus on like style. Like, let's say we really want the subject line to understand that we really care about the style. So I catch an email subject line from market email, blah, blah, blah. Let's do something like portraying the style. So this should, now it's going to still read like the examples, like the rules we gave it, but there should be a small tweak here when we see this. If not, we'll just optimize, we'll just iterate. We'll see if there's another way to say this that really portrays like whatever our brand or product style is. Okay, well, it just says, I don't know. To me, we're just sort of repeating it. We're not actually understanding, you know, style. Really focus on portraying. Let's try it with a higher temperature. Maybe it's just a temperature. it gives some variation. To me, it's not a ton. Um, I don't know. It might just be for it's okay. If you wanted your subject line to focus on specific style or specific tone or something, and like just really focus on that, then I guess you would say this is fine because it did. I was just hoping it would more try to rewrite the words in a specific style than just mentioning them. What if we just say just focus on it? We'll see if that does anything different. It's kind of the same. Um, See if there's anything else worth focusing on. Um, really focus on our tone. I don't know. Oh, okay. I kind of like that one a little bit more. Float in the summer. I kind of like that one a little bit more. We can see, yeah, look at that. Step into summer against two emojis in a row, which we haven't seen yet. So you can see when you adjust the instructions, you can use that to portray your goal state output definition as well. Now, the one downside to using the instructions to portray your goal state output definition is that it's going to really follow whatever you put there. So if you want variability outside of that, it's a little bit harder to do because your instructions just say to do that. You don't say to like do that sometimes or only do that in these scenarios. You're saying like really focus on this or don't do that. It's the same idea where if you put only generate one subject line, it's never going to generate more than that because you've made that entirely clear in your instructions. Whereas when you provide a bunch of examples and some rules and stuff, it's less heavy of a guidance, and more of a suggestion or more of just like these are the best things to follow instead of only do this or only do that. So that is the one downside to adjusting your instructions. I like to keep my instructions more generic and then use the context of examples and rules and stuff to try to guide, because I don't want to get too focused on specific stuff unless there's rules that you want to include in your instructions that are must-haves. Like, let's say you wanted to only generate results in like a key value pair format or some other like schema or structure thing where like you do not want the output in any other format, then that's perfectly fine because you just don't have a choice. Like in that example, if it doesn't return JSON, your code probably breaks somewhere or something. So that is the one thing where I do try to leave the instructions more vague. I still want to cover, like we are doing a subject line. We are doing it about this product. We are doing a marketing email. Like you still have to have those. But doing stuff like this, unless you really do want every single output to have it, it's just something to be careful about and something that's worth testing. I actually really do like these ones, especially this one. I do like what came out there, but it's just something to kind of note and mention. This is kind of like the ones we saw from before. See if we get anything new there. Yeah, it's kind of cycling the same ones, which is fine. If you like them, then you like them and use them. If not, then you can go from there. But I did kind of want to show that just to show what changing the instructions does and that it really affects the outcome compared to some of the other context stuff, which is a little bit more of just a knob turn than an entirely different system. So now you have iterated, you've taken your basic prompt to something that better fits some sort of goal state output definition based on some data, some examples, a couple small iterations. And now you're ready to sort of see, the last one is, how do I iterate and how do I improve this in something that's actually logical? and is quantifiable and everything like that. And evaluation is the way to do that. Evaluating the outputs, really putting them to the test in terms of what you're actually supposed to get with your goal state output is the best way to iterate. We rarely make big prompt changes that aren't driven by some sort of understanding of an increased accuracy or a better ability to match some criteria or something like that. There's just no point in trying to make a bunch of prompt changes if you aren't backing it by data. Now, in the beginning, when you're just trying to get to a baseline that you think is pretty good, like we did earlier, you can make a bunch of changes. It's not that big a deal. Just from doing this that you're going from something that's very basic to something that's not as basic. But now you want to see if now you've put some time into it. Am I moving in the right direction? I want to understand that. And this is the best way to do it. These we create are called our evaluation sheets, and we give them to whoever the stakeholder is of success. And that's going to be the person that is in charge of deciding if it's good or not. In a legal summarizer, that would be a lawyer. If that in a email marketing tool, that would maybe be your email marketing boss in this example, or your coworker, whoever is sort of in charge or is a good stakeholder for, I know what is successful for our use case. And in production, it's going to be your users. But in this stage where we're trying to design our prompt or something like that, there needs to be some sort of stakeholder. Maybe it's just you. Maybe it's, you're the domain expert. Maybe you're an email marketer and you're trying to build your own prompting tool and you're the expert. Somebody has to be able to say this is good or not and have the credentials to be able to do that. So what we do is we create these sheets that are just a bunch of different runs. So we run it a whole bunch of times. If we have different versions of our prompt, like we saw before, we run each of those versions. If we have different products, you can see we were just using this this top from before, but I ran a different product through as well so we could see that. And we store the inputs that we gave, our prompt, the product title, and then the outputs that were generated. Now, I also do like to store the temperature so that we can kind of get a feel for where are we going with this. It's not a big deal if you don't store it because it's not traceable. Like, you don't know which tokens were random and which ones weren't. So it's useful, but it's not insanely useful. And then we use a note section so that stakeholder can provide any sort of specific notes. This has too many emojis. This doesn't have enough emojis. I don't like when it says this. I don't like when it says that. Things that you can sort of start to pick up on, like patterns, and take care of some of those edge cases. If they said, I never want it to use the word summer, right? I never wanted to say summer. I always want to say something else. Well, then you could create a rule in your prompt that says don't use the word summer because they've made a idea we don't want to do this, and they've made that clear in the notes or something like that. So what we would do is we would generate this. It would be much longer. It'd be a big thing, whole bunch of runs, whole bunch of examples. We would give it to the stakeholder. We'd ask them to review it. And what they would do is they would color code. So they would do green if where's the green that we use? This one. Green if it's correct. If they say 100%, this one is good. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. This one is great. I love this one. We go from there. Yellow is what we use if, let's use a darker one. Yellow is what we use if, we like it, but this needs to change. Or I would really like it if it didn't have this. Or I like, in longer examples like summaries, I love all this summary, but this one sentence. So where it's like, if I like it, I'd be okay with it if it came out, but it's not perfect. It's not 100% good. It's pretty good. And then they would put some notes to say why that is, and they go from there. Red, we use red for this is wrong. This is incorrect. This is not good. Similar to how a lawyer uses a red line or something like that. And they would put in their notes why that is. From there, and they go through, they label all those. Now we have something that's kind of interesting. We have some idea of an accuracy score, the green ones, and then if you want to include the yellow ones too, you can. Some people like it, some people don't. We have some sort of idea of accuracy. And if we did different prompt versions, we even have an accuracy number per prompt. So that's kind of interesting too. We can kind of see like which prompt does our customer really like if we were split testing a bunch. Or our stakeholder, customer, stakeholder, whoever you're using to evaluate this. And now in our notes, we kind of have like a good idea of, some general ideas about what's good. Maybe they said it's too long, it's too short. I don't like when it says this, I don't like that. You can now sort of see some stuff that you can use in rules. You can look at your instructions and see if there's things we change in our instructions. This is the piece where we are looking at what we've done. We are evaluating the output, and we are trying to understand the model's understanding of the task. We're trying to improve that. The model only knows what we gave it. And so if we make adjustments to the prompt, our model will better understand the next time not to use this word. Don't go this long. Really focus on, like, let's say they didn't actually care about, they didn't care about cool stories or name recognition. We can take that out. We don't need it. The customer or the stakeholder doesn't care. We are now using evaluation to, one, quantify our instructions. We're using it to hone in on our goal state output definition. Now we have a better idea about what it means to be correct because the stakeholder gave us info about, I don't like this, I like that, etc. And we can use this, one, to iterate, but two, to help with the understanding of the context. Maybe we figure out that, this, we don't like these examples. Now we can trade them out for something else. We can trade them out for the ones that were green. We know that they were correct. The customer said 100% they're good. We can trade them out. We can use those. Maybe we like this list, but there's even more stuff we want to add. There's a blog post we want to add, or there's, you could add the notes. If the notes say like, don't use this word, or really focus on this tone, or really focus on this style, we can update our rules, our list of information here to say focus on style, focus on tone. And so this is really one of the best ways that you're going to be able to iterate forward. It's very hard in a production setting with tons of use and all this stuff to iterate without some sort of accuracy number or some sort of understanding of where we're at, because you're just shooting stuff in the dark. It's no different from other machine learning use cases where you would never iterate a model if you didn't know what the weights were and what the accuracy score is and what data set was used in training and things like that. You would never do that. So why in prompting would you do that? What's the point? This is going to be where you spend a lot of time. You're going to take this feedback, you are going to make adjustments, iterations, and you're going to create a V2 sheet, and you're going to generate, you're going to run through, usually focusing on running through the no's and the yellows to see if this time they're better. And then you'll throw in a couple other random ones. I usually like to do like 70% focused on the yellows and reds, and then 30% are completely brand new samples. And we're going to run all those through, and we're going to give them back to the stakeholder. We're going to go from there. And what you'll see over time is if you do this correctly, the greens improves every time. The yellows improves every time. Usually you'll start to see once you're on the 10th, 15th, 20th iteration, you really only have red and green. You just don't get as much in the middle, which is good because that it's clear why, with reds, it's clear why it's red. With green, it's clear why it's green. There's no sort of mixed bag or anything like that. It's very easy to see. And you can add more products. You can test, let's say you did this. Now you have a V3, you run it through. You should also test the V1 and the V2 just to see if like, hey, do these ones perform even better, especially early? You might as well. There's no reason why not to. You're still so up in the air about which prompt is best. You might as well test them all. But this is really what you want to be doing during development. These are eval sheets. I'll put a comment or a link to this one below so you guys can just take this template. With chatbots, we do the same thing. You have the whole conversation and the customer puts, I like this step, I don't like this step, I wish the conversation went here, I don't want it to talk about this, etc. Same idea, same workflow, but this is how you're going to be able to eval your system and then be able to take the feedback and help the model's understanding of your goal state output definition by improving the context, improving the instructions, and being able to go from there. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you guys can take this and easily sort of, integrate it into your prompts. If you're having issues with prompts, you don't really know how to improve it, start with your instructions, feel like they are clear, it's easy to understand, it makes sense. Work on your context, few shot examples, rules, things like that. Try to help the model's understanding of your task as much as possible. And then when you think you've taken it to a good point of evaluation, hand it to the stakeholder or you're the stakeholder and go from there and really use that feedback, really use that data. You can take this, you can run the notes through ChatGPT and ask what are the 5 most common notes, and it'll give you those, and you can sort of start with those and iterate on them and then say, what are the next 5 most common or something like that. This is a really effective plan, and really focusing on these 4 things in general will make it so it's very hard for your prompts to be stuck. It's very hard if you sort of focus on your instructions, your goal state output definition, the understanding of the context and eval. It's kind of hard to be stuck. If you're stuck, it means there's some sort of very clear disconnect between the task or maybe even the stakeholder. Maybe the stakeholder doesn't really totally understand what the goal state output definition should look like. Maybe they're starting to contradict that in the results. You see above they gave green to this one. The next one down, it looks almost identical. They gave it a no. Maybe that is something that comes up as well. But it's very hard not to get clarity when you're focused on these 4 ideas in prompting. So I will leave all these resources in the description. I will also put a link to our Discord. We're growing our Discord every single day, getting everyone in there. We are planning a hackathon right now, a paid, a couple prize winner hackathon. Hope to see you guys over there. Hope you enjoyed this, and let me know.